Hello, everyone. This is Sola Abulu. This is just a short recording where I'm going to try to talk you through a PDF that we created sometime this month, in March or February 2025. And it's talking about how to quantify the impact of your communication strategy. And this is something that, really came home to me as being very, very important in a lot of the courses that we've run, where it's always coming up. This is like one of the frequently asked questions. It's like, how do I quantify the impact of my communication strategy? So we have this as a PDF online, but then I wanted to do a video on it. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to try to make sure it's not too long. So, first of all, you have to agree. And this, I'm going to take you through a number of steps. And what I'm going to be sharing, this is essentially what I learned myself in terms of how to find out what success looks like, how to measure. I think most people have the traditional way of measuring when you're, like you monitor, metrics, social media metrics, online metrics, maybe media mention, that sort of thing. But I'm not really going to be focusing on that. I'm really going to be talking about a different approach to measuring impact, one that is targeted and it is based on what you're trying to achieve and how to measure what is tangible and what really moves the needle in terms of whatever the business or the organization is trying to achieve. Now, if it turns out that changing, media conversation, media sentiment and mention is an intrinsic part of what that strategic intent is, then that's something you should measure. But it shouldn't be like you have a default set of metrics that you measure for every situation, whether it's relevant or not. The challenge of strategic communication is really making sure that everything that you do is tailor-made and bespoke to the context, the needs, and what you're trying to achieve in that current situation. And it's a mindset shift because I think many of us have been so used to working in very structured silos in terms of what we're supposed to do that sometimes just breaking out of that box and being able to think outside of the box takes a lot from many of us. But that is the journey that we're on. We at SA&A, I personally as Sola Abulu, that's something that I am really taking on, that we're going to help everyone, all of us collectively, to break out of that mindset shift and begin to approach problems differently. As problem solvers, we solve problems using communication, so there is not a one size fits all approach, but we work with concepts and principles and we apply them as required. So first of all, you need to agree what success looks like. That's the starting point. You agree what success looks like with the project sponsor or funding. Now, everything I'm going to be sharing here is it's applicable whether private sector, public sector. So even if I'm giving an example and I'm talking on the business side, don't think of it that it's only applicable to the business. It's just that that's the example that comes to mind. But just apply it to either your NGO, humanitarian, faith-based context, or commercial or institutional or policy making or political, whatever the case may be. So whoever is paying the bill, whoever is the leader in whatever it is you're doing, you need to agree what success is. This is very important. Otherwise, you will have misaligned expectations. I always hear comms people having this thing where they're saying they don't get budgets. Yes, because at the end of the day, most of us are running activities that the business didn't even, there is no connect. So at the end of the day, when you're coming back for money again, people are like, look, I have real problems with the business, or I have real problems with the organization or the institution. I don't have money to spend on, to them, it's like you want to spend money to have a party. So we have to move, and this is what strategic communications does. It doesn't create events and activities just for the sake of it. It locates itself inside the problems that the organization or the institution is grappling with, because that's the only way you will get that funding. But when you are running a strategy that is on another side from what the organization is actually demanding, then, or is interested in, then that's a major problem. So anyways, let's move on. So you need to agree what success look like, then measure what matters. I've talked about that. Again, ensure you are measuring what matters to the core business or the agenda of the organization or entity. Don't be fixated about what you must measure. And I think this is going to be a real challenge for some people, because I think some people are just fixated on it. But just try and have an open mind. Let's work with me on this. And if you have attended our strategic communications course, I think this will make sense to you at some level. We're going to be deepening this quantification part, and that's why I'm even sharing this, publicly, because I realize that not everybody may be able to attend our courses. In the courses, we will go even deeper into this because I'm going to be doing even more research to make sure I illustrate it better. I also want people to bring their own examples so that we can make it really live, and show that we can apply this across board. So we measure what matters. And again, you cannot know what matters without talking to the leaders. Now, many of us will have seen this acronym before. You set SMART targets, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound, tangible. I've had a lot of communications people say that they set unrealistic targets just because. I'm like, no matter the pressure that is put upon you, that is something you should not do, because once you set an unrealistic target, you are doomed for failure. That means you are taking on, I don't even understand how that is even, how do you function? Because that means everything you are already agreeing to failure from the get-go. So you are working on, you are setting a target for yourself that you know is not achievable, and you are working it. No, these are not things that should even happen. Whatever it takes, have the conversation, let them know it is not possible. Then look for tangible indicators to measure and build a target around it. This is very important. For instance, if it's a political election or a campaign that you're involved in, the metrics should be measured, for instance, on things like voter registration in party strongholds compared to voter registration in places that are not the party strongholds. Don't be counting the number of impressions, or that, oh, we got a lot of engagement. When we did that visit to the market square, the post went viral, the video went viral, but nobody is registering. Do you understand what I'm saying? How does that, and this happens to a lot of political candidates, where they spend a lot of money on the campaigns, but nobody is measuring what matters. So at the end of the day, they spent a lot of money, they don't get any, they don't get any votes. So with that shift really has to take place. And I'm using that as an example. Again, there are other examples. And wherever you're watching this, if you have a case study that you would want me to do a video around how to build a target around a particular scenario, please share it and we'll do that. So again, ensure you clarify expectations from your internal stakeholders in terms of which audience should you be targeting, which profile, who should we reach, what is the call to action, what do we expect from them, what do they want in the media? Because for some business leaders or organizational leaders, just a buzz in the media is okay. But if that is the case, document it, write it down, ensure it is signed off in the plan that all they want is media buzz, and this is the amount of buzz. Now you can then talk about, I want the stories to have gotten to this level, how many media mentions, the share of voice and keywords around this particular issue. You want all of that. So I would always recommend get an AI tool. And there are several of them around. I won't mention them, but there are many. The one that I'm very familiar with, that I know a lot, I won't mention it because I don't want to just be like I'm recommending one. But some of those AI tools are very good. And if you've already checked, do your check before time. Run the words, run the name of the business or the organization, run the keywords that you want to track them against those words. Like if there's an issue, climate change or whatever, or energy transition, or or state politics, or you're in energy, there's something that there's an issue that you would like your initiatives to be tracked, or your agenda to be tracked against. If you're in the humanitarian sector, is it disease, is it hunger, is it security issues? And if there's a particular location or country, or or conflicts that you're involved in, track your words, identify the keywords for that campaign, and track your own coverage around it. Once you have those, then you know, then you can have an agreement with your sponsor that we want to increase our share of voice in media coverage around these issues within this area. The analytics today can give you all of that, but you need to agree with your sponsor. So once and you must have a baseline that you share with them, and then you agree what the incremental outcomes, what the final outcomes, and then you also have an honest conversation about what communications can achieve and what it cannot achieve. I think these are the things that make it very difficult or easy, depending on how you manage it. Because when you are not upfront about what communications cannot achieve, and I've seen a lot of people get in this situation, you're just delaying the pain, because eventually you're going to have an unsatisfied boss, an unsatisfied leader, and some very uncomfortable conversations will happen going forward. So I've touched on this already. Know your baseline. That's the next step. Once you have agreed how success will be measured, be sure to document it, report the baseline metrics before you start your campaign. I talked about that earlier. You can use any of the AI tools, whatever it is. Your baseline metrics may also be metrics offline, for instance, or metrics that you gather from a different entity, like the political example I gave, metrics in terms of voter registration. If it's in your office and they're trying to find out how safety compliance is, you can get the data as to how many people are complying with the environmental or the safety um, rules that are in place, what's the level of uncompliance like or lack of compliance at, where do we need it to be in terms of performance, what figures are we monitoring. Sometimes even performance in a particular operation or facility, if it's internal comms, may be very low, and you've been called in to work with maybe HR, another member, and the business to find out how you can increase performance or productivity. And you've done your data gathering, your research, you've done focus groups with the staff, and you've seen that they've talked about issues around, maybe motivation, leadership, that kind of thing. And then a campaign is put in place in terms of what the business and the leadership are going to do to address those things. So there's communication around behaviors, there's communication. You launch a campaign around behaviors, around things that the company is going to do, fostering collaboration, and then, all sorts of things. And then you begin to measure and monitor those metrics as you go along. But of course, the actions you must be taken or the intervention must be such that it can actually address those problems. So articulate clearly what the current reality is in tangible value terms. The current state of it could be relationships, it could be inquiries, interest, applications, enrollments, performance, like I said. Then set your metrics based on percentage improvement. But ensure that the campaign is targeted at influencing the groups that directly enable the movement of that issue from one place to the other. For instance, if you find out that there's a leadership issue in the organization, the leaders are not living well, there is a disconnect between the leaders and those being led, think about it. What are the communications and engagement interventions that we can make to bring about this change? Sometimes it's even just facilitating an event where this feedback is sent back to people. But if you put in place a metric that makes you know that we're going to be monitoring this over time and we're going to be doing it through a communications campaign, then that becomes something that you can use. Again, you see, the challenge with this is that until I have a specific context, it's really difficult to just prescribe for everybody. It's just like when you deal with a patient as a medical doctor. You can't tell everybody that, if you have fever, that means that you must be malaria and you fit. So even when the symptoms present the same, you have to ask the patient specific question. What's your medical history like? You have to run some tests. And then based on the feedback that you get from the test, the questions, and in terms of the lifestyle, the level of health that is required for this person to function in their role, then you begin to prescribe. And then, of course, you watch as the patient handles the medication. That's exactly how communications is. It has to be, for it to be strategic, structured, and deliver predictable results, you really have to spend some time interrogating the case of the patient or the context that you're working with. Otherwise, you're going to be transporting somebody else's treatment plan for a patient that doesn't need it, or a patient that is not what is wrong with the patient is completely different. So again, how do you develop that impact-based KPIs? And that's really the language that I want to be using to address this thing. It's impact-based key performance indicators, not activity-based, not task-based KPIs. And even if for any reason, because maybe you are not able to do impact-based KPI, understand the limitations of following a tactic-based KPI and how that will affect your credibility as a comms professional, and also your ability to source more funding for your jobs in the future, for your work in the future. So identify specific areas that could benefit from a communications engagement, engage the people on the ground and the people who know about this issue or this business. You cannot sit on your table as a comms person in your office and expect that you will just sit and be making you can do everything on your table. No, it's not. You have to engage the business. You have to engage the leaders, the organization, the institution. Find out what is going on. If you're in the humanitarian sector, talk to the field team. This issue that we're working on is not just staying in your office and building campaigns. You don't have to visit the sites physically, but in this virtual world, talk to the people on the ground, and then you get some insights, and then you use that to begin to decide what are the tangible and trackable action-based indicators that when I see a movement in this, I can actually know that our communication is making an impact. Get baseline figures from the people on the ground. Develop your campaign based on identified audiences. So every campaign should be targeted. Don't just throw it in the air and be like, well, whoever grabs it will grab it. It doesn't work that way. You have to target now. You have to decide. Even when health or disease communications goes out, you have to target. You look at who are the most at risk population. There's no point, for instance, if there's a cholera outbreak, there are certain people that are not at risk because they just don't drink. Their lifestyle, they're not going to, I mean, there's no public water system. They hardly ever take water from everywhere. They're drinking bottled water all the time. If there's also a risk in bottled water, there's some places you should also not target because there's some people who don't take bottled water. So that targeting is very important. And you can only target when you understand a bit about what the issue is and where the opportunities are to make a change with the identified audiences, and then you develop trackable indicators. I hope I'm communicating, please. Then you can then decide on, if it's, for instance, an amplification campaign, success can be measured by reach, by conversation. If it's an advocacy campaign, success can be measured by post-campaign commitments made by targeted groups. These are tangible and concrete actions. So sometimes you measure results based on metrics like percentages. Sometimes it's milestones, achievements, actions that people that they take. But again, the conversation has to be had upfront. So this slide looks at examples of what to measure. In the context of development communication, for instance, like I've said before, you engage the field team, subject matter experts on relevant metrics to measure the success of the communications campaign. And this may require, for instance, differentiating between impact from direct in-person engagement versus that arising from communications campaigns based on those that were reached by in-person contact. What was I trying to say here? I'm saying that sometimes in a communications campaign, because I've heard people say, how there are many of us working in this space, how do I differentiate what communications was able to achieve and what was done by other people? It's very simple. If you had already gotten your data and you knew the places where, okay, there was in-person contact and there were places where there were no in-person contact, and you are tracking your conversation at the back end, analytics wise. And this is very important because even on our social media channels, I mean, we put out posts as SA&A many times. When I check the back end, most of the time the feedback that comes back is amazing. I will find out that sometimes, some places in the world that I never knew, I could not have imagined, an audience, I would see that in some cases, the followers or the comments or the feedback from certain parts of the world, totally unexpected. And in the areas that I thought, like heartland areas, it may not be as high as I thought. So the feedback that you get from the analytics will also help you to be able to identify the areas, the impact of your communication. And you can get that. Even media mention, media reach will show you which parts of the world. If you're doing a campaign or you put out some stories, what part of Nigeria, for instance, was this story resonating? Where was independent coverage coming from? How was social media tracking? Where did it not track at all? Now, if you notice an area where social media conversation, it seemed like the penetration and the reach and the independent third-party coverage was pretty high, and then you now notice compliance in your campaign or some actions, you can then attribute it. You can cross-reference, which is what I've talked about here. Okay, I'm not sure that I put it. Cross-referencing data is very, very important. You can then cross-reference and show. So there's a level of research, data, and insights that is actually required in being able to measure and demonstrate tangible impact. You must be, if you're not a comms person that has that research, data, and analytical thinking type of mindset, then you need to get somebody that will help you do it. Because a lot of it is really around your ability to, yeah, I think this was where I talked about it, data cross-referencing is very important because sometimes, okay, so before I get to this part, let me not jump this other one. So another example of how to measure in human rights context. So this I just gave an example. This were like I spent a lot of time working in strategy and planning in my working life days, my 9 to 5 days, and well, I'm still doing 9 to 5, but you know what I mean. So and the well, I'm not really doing 9 to 5. I do more than 9 to 5 now. So, but anyways, so the performance measurements, the way you look at it, you talk about your issue or your activity. So this is, let's assume this human rights context, the issue is human trafficking, the activities, you're going to set up a campaign against it. Now, this setting up of this campaign, there are some things that you have already engaged the subject matter experts around, and you've seen that, okay, most of the human trafficking is being done through illegal border crossings and, targeting of young people and all of that. So all of your campaign targets those at-risk groups in those countries, in those locations, in those communities, and then you're also working with the immigration bodies to see what's happening at the border. So your key performance indicators will not be about how many media posts, social media posts you put out. It should not be about how many retweets and engagement or likes that you got. It should be about tangible things, because the issue is a serious one. And the communication is not supposed to just be something that will happen and it just be an event or an activity. You are trying to positively impact this highly negative and vicious trend and that is going on. So the KPI you should set for yourself, not just you, but everybody else involved in this intervention, including the whoever the stakeholders are. Reduction in illegal border crossings. If there are also any other matrix that you think would be important to put in here as a key performance indicator. Key performance indicator means something that shows us that what we are doing is working. That's what it is. So if your issue is this, your KPI, there must be a direct connect. So which is why, to be honest, I struggle when people say, how do I measure the impact of my communication? That tells me that you are not connecting your work to anything tangible. Because if you were connecting it to something tangible and that something tangible, there was you had done the research to see how that thing manifests over its life cycle, you would have been able to identify communications intervention points on the stage, and you will know what to measure to be able to attribute A to Z. So again, I would like feedback from you. Is any of this making sense? So the same example here, gender-based violence, campaign against gender-based violence, increase in reporting. If you're seeing more people coming up, for instance, in Nigeria, Lagos, where I live, Lagos, there is a high sensitivity against gender-based violence because there's a state government agency that is very on the ball on that matter, and the campaigning is so much that we have seen a huge increase in reporting and prosecutions since this agency really came to life. It's unprecedented. In the whole country, there's nothing like it. So, but you can actually see the work that is being done in this activity space. Campaigns, messages, and everybody, in fact, the awareness of the existence of the agency, I think, is one of the most important things that they've done. And then when the prosecutions happen, they also come back to communicate to us that it's done. So we all know that there is an agency like this. So when there's an issue where people are quick to report. So you can't tell me the people working in this space in communications will be struggling to quantify the impacts. You can't convince me. But this is something that requires legal intervention, the police. There is so many other people involved with this. But you cannot remove the communications impact or importance in this. In fact, everything they do really thrives on the communication of it, the awareness. In fact, every time what people then do, whenever there's a case of gender-based violence in their communities, they bring it to social media and they tag that agency in Lagos. So, and then the agency says, thank you for bringing this to our notice. So there's a communications channel that has been built. And it is being held, so the people that monitor the social media, even the awareness to make citizens know something happened offline, people bring it online rather than even reporting to the agency in person. That is communication. That's strategic communications in living color. And all the person who is managing that page has to be tracking the increase in reporting and all of these actions in line with all of the campaign outreaches that they've been making. This is a practical example. I hope this makes sense. So again, we talked about set up your tracking tools. If you don't have tracking tools, you cannot make sense of all of these things. So it could be, digital analytics tools set up to monitor the conversation on an issue. The media mentioned how it's moving. Now, why all of this is important, and I think this is where communications people miss it. Most communications people tend to just measure the conversation and they leave it there. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to measure, monitor the media mention, share of voice and all of that, and then tie it to something tangible that happened in the real world around that time. So that if other people are not making the connection, you are helping your leaders to make the connection that I suspect at the same time this was happening. Please bear in mind that this was how we had raised the profile of the organization and that there's a direct correlation. For instance, if we're doing an IPO and you then find out that the IPO was oversubscribed, if you checked your analytics, you could then you are likely to see the reach of the campaign and the advertisement around the IPO that then showed itself in it's been oversubscribed. It is possible that at that same time too there were other events, there were other outreaches that people did. But if there is a significant rise from your communications pre-IPO campaign to during IPO campaign, then definitely communications had a role. Nobody can take that success away from you. But if you are not able to do that cross-referencing of data, nobody is going to do it for you. So, moving along now, I'm already well out of time. So, key points to note. Yeah, nice slide. Thank you. So, some level of research, like what I've said, and consultation is required to come up with targeted KPIs that move the needle. It's not just something, and I think it's that piece of work that a lot of people are not keen to do, but you have to do it if you need to move your practice to the level of strategic communication where you have credibility as a professional and you are able to move the needle. And you see the way the world is going right now, nobody's ready to spend money for nothing. So predictability is really a thing. And making sure that you are in that position where your communications hits the target and you are able to show that you are achieving what you set out to do, I think it's absolutely important for everybody as a practitioner, as leaders, or in communication. So, to be able to demonstrate attribution, now, one important thing is your campaign must be highly tailored. I've talked about that, and targeted from the onset to specific groups. Creating awareness, promoting trackable actions. What did I say? Trackable actions. If there's nothing that I will leave with you today is that language. Trackable actions, actions that you can track. That should be the goal. And track tangible actions, not just any, because and the meaning of tangible. Now, let me differentiate between measurability and tangibility. You can measure anything. I can measure, droplets in the air. I can measure things that you cannot see. You can, things like that. You can measure anything. You can count it. It doesn't have to be tangible. Intangible and tangible things can be counted. But when you say an action needs to be tangible, you mean it needs to be visible. It needs to be something that you can hold, that you can taste, that you can touch, that you can use, and that actually moves things. And that's where I want us to think about. It's not just about activities, but tangible actions. And how do we then develop tangible metrics to monitor those credible metrics to monitor the tangible actions that are taking place? Because if your organization has tangible problems or a tangible agenda that they want to resolve, then your communications must be able to deliver tangible results. So don't tell me, because so long as if you say, I hear a lot of people say it's difficult to measure the impact of what we do there. That's very serious, because every other team, every other function has no problem measuring the impact of what they're doing. And that's because they ensure that whatever they are doing is tied to the business or the organizational or the institutional agenda. We have to make sure that we make that connect happen. And it's going to take some work, but it is doable. So, and I hope these steps have helped. So again, buzz is not synonymous with impact. You have to make sure that the kind of buzz you are creating is helpful for the impact that you want to have. It's a simple example for me is we create social media content in Sola Abulu and Associates. We're a communication consulting firm. And if at the end of the day all we're doing is I put out a post a couple of days ago. There was a bit of a response and all of that. But if it's not converting to people actually registering, people signing up, or people enrolling for the courses, then do you understand? I'm just creating buzz. It's not, and I'm not here to create buzz. Do you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, because the business runs based on tangible metrics, it runs based on how many clients we get, how many consulting works we do, and the way in which our courses are taken up. So at the end of the day, that conversion must be happening. Otherwise, the communications is not hitting the mark. But then if we're in business only to create buzz and that's all we're doing, then that's also fine. So it's really about, again, knowing what to measure. What does success look like? Why? What is the reason for being? Why is this even an issue? Why are we doing this? So making that, and it's so easy to make the connect, but I think a lot of us have been conditioned into thinking that we work in a space of intangibles. No, we do not. Not really. Not with strategic communications. Strategic communications deals with predictability. It is the science and the art of communication. There's nothing intangible in strategic communications, not anymore. So ensure you research and document the before and the after metrics, otherwise it is impossible to give partial or full attribution of success. Again, like I said, sometimes there may be many people playing in the space, so you may not be able to attribute 100% to you, but partial attribution, but you have to be able to cross-reference things. If you're unable to do it, for me, I'm extremely good at it because I monitor things. So, for instance, if I send you, and I've had this happen in my working life where I send proposals out to people, they didn't respond to the proposals. 2 or 3 days later, I saw evidence of it being implemented somewhere. You will have, do you understand? As far as you can't convince me that, and do you understand what I'm saying? So that for itself has made me understand that what I sent to you is helpful because I checked. So do you know what I mean? So if you don't do that cross-referencing, no one will do it for you. That's what I found. You have to be the one to go and check. It's like when you put a pot on the fire, you go and check, is it boiling? So that you know when you put it, you are able to say, I was the one that put the pot on the fire. I know when it's boiling, even if other people came in and out, you have to know. If you don't monitor, certain things will happen, you won't be able to prove. You have to, once you start the campaign, and if you've done your research before and after, you need to really monitor and put in place everything that enables you to monitor well, both through offline and online sources in a credible and measurable way. So you measure impact and outcomes, well-researched, bespoke, and fit for purpose structure. And I know one other question that people say is like, oh, I don't have time to this. Well, I'm like, okay, if you don't have time to do this, then I think you will have enough time to also sit down and listen to all the conversations about the lack of impact that communications is making. You also don't be surprised when they bring in other people to come and do the job at a point in time. You know what I mean? So you pick your pain, it's either now or later. It's either you take control of your space and you do the work to learn how to become more purposeful, strategic in terms of not just how we communicate, but how we quantify the impact of your communication so that you have the credibility and the space within the organization that you work for and that you are able to secure space and support for your contribution, your role, and your impact going forward. And I would love to hear from you in terms of how helpful you have found this segment. And this is an example of what you learn, what you get when you join any of our courses. And wherever in the world that you are, we have play on demand courses running available 24/7 via learn.solaabuluassociates.com. You can join the platform. You have access to the content for about 6 weeks. They are accredited courses, accredited by the CPD Standards Organization, internationally accredited content. We have 3 courses: strategic communications, brand strategy and marketing communications, and public sector policy and political communications course, all on our platform, available now. And at this month, we're running a discount for women, 20%, March 2025, ends on the 31st of March. And we have 15% discount running for everyone, Easter promo up till the 21st of April 2025. So take the opportunity to learn on our platform. If you have liked some of this content, the strategic communications course is the foundation course. If you're new to communication and you want to get the basic concepts and principles and know how to implement what we have shared in this video, I would recommend that you sign up for the strategic communications course. You have the opportunity to ask questions from me, and I take those questions back and forth all through the content, 6 modules in all. You can finish it in a day. It's just 6 hours of videos and quizzes as well, but you can also reflect on it for as long as the 6-week period is on. Immediately you finish the course, you complete the modules, you get your certificates within 2 working days. You still have access to the content until the 6 weeks dial runs off. So I look forward to seeing you on the platform, and I would also like to hear from you if this has been useful. I would love to hear your comments as well. And if you think this is something you can actually implement, or whether it sounds like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. So thank you very much. And I look forward to engaging with you further. Thank you. All the best.